Good afternoon. This is Debbie West on Lost Knowledge. Have my co-host Michael Hathaway on. Michael? Hello.
Hi, Deb.
I'm having trouble finding the guest again.
This is the visible guest.
Again! Yes, the guys in California. They don't read the fine print. Central Standard Time. So we are on the hunt for Michael Hayes. He is scheduled to be on the show today and is confirmed. And I'll go ahead and give a little background on him, and we can talk to him as soon as he gets near his computer or phone. Michael's background is he's a spiritual counselor and a seminar leader. He's been doing that for 35 years. He started his work at a young age, 21. He received spiritual healing that moved him and inspired him to a calling. And he also worked with a man named John Roger who founded a church, the Church of the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness. They call it MSIA, back in 1981. And Michael Hayes has an MA degree in counseling, psychology, and creative development. He worked towards a doctorate and completed a master's in spiritual psychology and a spiritual science program from Peace Theological Seminary and College of Philosophy. So he's got a lot of background in counseling, healing, and he was featured in a book, Michael, that we talked to the author of, which is called The Light. And if you remember, The Light was Katie Keating, and she had excerpts from maybe 10 or 12 different people focusing on how they saw light playing out in our lives in a spiritual way and also in a scientific way. So he had a chapter in that book called The Light, and it was called Understanding the Light. So we're hoping that Michael Hayes is going to cue into some of our nudges that told him that we were expecting him today. Michael?
Yes, can you hear me?
A little bit. You can talk a little bit louder, maybe.
Hi, Deb. We're getting a little. I will talk a little louder, and I'll bring us a little closer. Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah, we have a delay going ourselves between each other, so it's like a 4 or 5 second sometimes delay in case we walk on each other. The light itself is a very interesting aspect of spirituality. I know that it's something that rings very true to me in that divine connection. And watching Michael's little YouTube blurb that he has on his site, you can see that he is really connected, and he's almost like channeling the information when it's coming out. In other words, that's when it comes like pure light. It's coming through and passed on without almost a conscious any reaction with it while it's taking place.
Yeah, and I guess that began for him at a young age, and he's been working for quite some time, to manifest that and to harness it and to use it towards, helping people. So he has a whole lot of testimonials about the work he does and how he's helped so many millions of people.
Well, we're back to that, what I sometimes call the tipping point. In other words, it's that element in one's life that all of a sudden changes the perception of life and the cosmos itself. And his was, I believe, working to overcome problems with his back and going through that healing process, and the shift took place where all of a sudden it opened up a whole connection out there to way beyond the earth.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask him, because he doesn't mention it specifically, although he alludes to it quite a bit about, where this source of light comes from for him and, where it is out there in the cosmos, I guess. But interestingly, my nephew's visiting, and we went to the Houston I think it's the Natural Science Museum here in Houston, and they have I guess it's called like a planetarium, and they had an amazing video that we saw called Passport to the Universe, narrated by Tom Hanks, and it was about a 30-minute video, but it was one of those where it appeared above you and you could see the sky and the universe, and they talked about where we sit, our address in the universe, Earth, within our solar system, and then the many other solar systems that that make up our particular area, and then those around us, and then bigger and bigger, and that's only what we have seen so far using what technology we have, which is the Hubble. So it really puts into perspective how small Earth is on the map. It was quite fascinating. I loved it.
I was going to say, what kind of a resonance did it ring with you, knowing your connection to the cosmos?
Well, it was quite interesting. I mean, it shows the Orion star system and Sirius, which are some of our very most closest neighbors. We think of Pluto and Saturn and Mars and those other planets, but the ones that really the ancients really talked about more are a little further out, and we can see them visibly. And but when you step back and you look at the cosmos from a bigger perspective and the bigger map, that is just literally, like everyone says, a drop in the bucket. And the millions of suns that are the size of our sun and way, way, way larger, are in the billions and billions, just in our galaxy. So it's eye-opening, and it's so interesting. It's so good to see that these kids and the adults to just sort of get a grasp on that, where we sit. And one of the things they talked about, which I thought was really interesting, was the importance of knowing where you are as you're traveling the universe, because obviously if you're traveling around out there, you need to know the coordinates, and if you're traveling through wormholes, you need to know where to get off, and it addressed those things. So it was really fun. It's nice to think about those things, I think.
I like that, the coordinates. That's pretty good. Know how to get back again.
Yeah, right. Traveling through the universe.
What did your nephew take away from it?
I don't know. I mean, he knows how. He knows.
What did your nephew take away?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he knows where I stand on a lot of that. And what's interesting, Michael, is that if you look at the kids' movies that are out there and the shows that they're watching, anything from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Guardians of the Galaxy and Minecraft, all of these games and toys and their video games and so on, they're all talking about dimensions and parallel universes and, going through stargates and portals, and it's just becoming very commonplace for these kids. They understand it already. So I was watching them play this video game called Minecraft, which is, I think, one of the most popular games out there. And they build portals, and they jump through into parallel universes. And that's their way of life in this game, inside this game. So, and it's a virtual online game that they play with others.
And so do you think somewhere there is a method to this process of those video games, perhaps some sort of training taking place?
Actually, that really
just is a coincidence?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, maybe they're doing some of that preparation work for, I tell him that. I tell my nephew, you're going to fly a spaceship. So probably already is. We're going to the NASA Space Center next. That's the next stop on our list in Houston. So, let me see if we can find a way to get a hold of Michael Hayes here, because if not, I don't think I'm going to keep this show running, because I do have company and I don't know what's happened to him. I'm going to give him a call. Let me see.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get him to pick up something, because we literally we confirmed this yesterday. I'm not sure what could have happened. other than the time zone problem that we've been experiencing. Let me see if I can get him to pick up.
The suspense.
I know, right? I'm sure he'll some sort of explanation.
Thank you so much for calling the session, Michael Hayes.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. He didn't pick up, so I don't know. I think we're going to have to try to reschedule him for another day since he's not around. Let me try one thing. I'm gonna try to call somebody else and see if she picks up.
Okay. Are we on the air, or are we just...
Yeah. No, we're still on the air. We're just having some problems with our guests, and maybe it's summer. Maybe it's 4th of July. I'm calling Carol to see if she'll pick up. I don't know if she will. My friend Carol. You've met Carol on the phone.
I talked to Carol when you were up.
Yeah, I don't think she's available either. So I do not have anything else in my bag of tricks here. So actually, I apologize to anybody that could be scheduled to listen to the show today. We're going to have to call it a day. We've got a guest who is disappeared. Unfortunately, maybe he's on California time and doesn't realize he's on air. He's scheduled to be on the show at 2:00. But his name is Michael Hayes. Again, he's a spiritual counselor. He appears in the book The Light. We've interviewed Katie Keating about some of the different guests that have been in that book, and she has a series of books. There's some experiences of the light, and
I just came back on.
Oh, wow, we do have Carol Rosin. Carol.
Yes.
It's Debbie and Michael on Lost Knowledge.
Hello. Good morning for me.
How are you?
All right. How are you?
We're good. And, Carol, we were just talking about the light and how we can use the light to help us during this process of cleansing the earth and preparing ourselves for ascension. How do you feel about that?
Well, I experience a lot of both the darkness and the light in the work that I do trying to prevent the weaponization of space. But what I'm seeing now is that we have a big choice to make as we are ascending and as we're moving physically and spiritually into the cosmos awareness and with our technology. So to me, it's important to connect with a focus and intention on the light workers and not on what's going on in the other frequencies, which I consider to be different, or some people say lower. Because that's where the people are, the humans are, and the cosmic beings are, who can actually help to create the new reality. I don't think that we can create the new reality with an earthbound perspective anymore. It's obviously important to know what's going on all over the world. I'm a newsaholic, so I watch CCTV, RTTV, Free Speech TV, and Link TV more than anything else, and your show, of course, because you're really focused on the light energy. And I think it's important for us now, in answer to your question more directly with all this chatter, is to focus with people who really get what you guys are talking about. Because for me, as an educator, I'm very sad to say I found that a lot of people are just not educable if they're still working in an earthbound frequency. Bound, literally bound.
Right.
So the light to me, that is where our energy comes from anyway. It's who we are as light beings. And I'm just really excited to be on this show with you because I know you understand that probably better than I do.
Well, I think we're all awakening to this new concept, and you've been through the time period where we traveled through some of the dark. We've traveled through the struggles that we have about trying to understand who we are and why we're here. And can you talk a little bit about how you, sort of this journey that you've had on discovering your own mission and really recognizing and embracing what you're here to do, and how you can, manifest that through the light that you connect with?
Thank you. Yeah, well, coming from being an educator and then a manager of an aerospace company, first woman in that kind of position, first woman testifying on this space weapons issue before the House and Senate and President's Commission on Space and all of that stuff, where I played in that very earthbound spun game. It's been a real up and down experience for me, as you know. You got me on the show calling me spontaneously like this. I won't call you names right now, but this is thank you, by the way. I do appreciate you. You're very funny. I will be able to explain it best as saying I feel like a yo-yo sometimes. I think anybody that isn't depressed about the world situation right now needs therapy, but if you really look at what's going on, it's really sad. And I do watch it. I'd probably be hanging out with the gorillas and the elephants and the orangutans and monkeys right now if I wasn't doing this work, which I got involved in because I got concerned about the orphans. And about 40-some years ago, when I really started to wake up, someone said to me, I think there are 50,000 orphans out there. And I went, 50,000 orphans? How are we going to find them homes? As an educator and a child psychologist, that was my... And if anybody, and I did this, looks at any of the many, many super vast issues of concern, the environment, human needs, energy, and all the aspects of all of those things, you end up at the war game, at the arms race, and where the money's going, and where the brains are going. And it's a drain. It's a drain on the economy. It's a great drain on our personal sense of security, which is billed as national security, which is where all the fighting takes place, that is an illusion created to benefit only a small amount of people. So in that system, I can describe my yo-yo self. I've never used that expression, but that's what I feel like as you ask me that question. I'm trying very hard, and it is an attempt. I fail sometimes to both pay attention in the higher frequency where I can actually keep working and get something done, to saying, that's it, I quit because it's helpless. I'm helpless. The whole situation is not going to change. We're going down. And so you can look.
So let me ask you one question. Is that the time where you really reach out to the higher self, to the light, to that light beyond the earth, and you do find some power there? You find some energy that can, sort of revitalize you?
Yes, thanks for steering me in that direction. Yeah, in that way of answering it. As I said, you have a way of articulating it better than I do. I have to sometimes just get out and go into nature. I feel like our politicians working in cement in Washington, D.C., or at the UN in the big, tall buildings with all the pollution and the ground heating up from methane or climate change, I feel like they don't get out in nature enough, and if they're hunters, maybe they do it that way. Or maybe once in a while they go to one of those places that they call retreats, to have their meetings. But that's about it. I have to go out into nature to get into that place where I can remember who I am, who we are really in these bodies. And, it's not an easy process for me. I feel like a kind of tormented artist, and I'm not an artist, but that's the way I can describe myself. If I smoked cigarettes, I'd be smoking right now. If I drank, I'd be drinking. A joint sounds good to me right now. But anyway, this is a way for me getting into that place where I can remember what you're describing.
It's hard. And so the density on Earth, the gravity on Earth brings us drags us down out of the light, and so our job and our ammunition is up higher than earthbound. Like you keep saying, it's out further. It extends past our human bodies and into this transcendence of soul that we reach out to, and that brings us power. That's our source of power, that light. And the smog around the earth, the darkness around the earth, the overpowering, like you say, stagnating, just disgust of what's happening, the destruction of the planet, the destruction of the species, the alienation of us to each other and ourselves, brings us all down and keeps us struggling for that light which we all seek, right? So we're seeking, and you're planning right now, Carol, some really exciting events and plans on helping people to keep that light in their heart and in their soul, right?
Yes, thank you.
ban space-based weapons. And they've gone through several rewrites on the treaty. It's been before the UN. It's been China and Russia have looked at it. Carol, are you back?
Okay, I'm back now.
Wonderful. So we were talking about the treaty for a second, and the decades-long work that you've been working towards, presenting this opportunity for us to stop the weaponization of space and to join into this greater, vast universe of life in a peaceful fashion and stop the destruction of the planet. So this is Debbie West on Lost Knowledge. We have an exciting opportunity here to talk to Carol Sue Rosin. Dr. Rosin authored In Search of Peace for the Children with Susan Babcock. It was dedicated to Dr. Carol Sue Rosin and her lifelong commitment to children, to saving lives, orphans, and as an educator, also the author of the Treaty on the Prevention of the Placement of Weapons in Outer Space, and her longtime work with Idea Foundation for the Benefit of Humanity. She is a peace pioneer and activist, a strong supporter, an example to all of us, particularly women in power, as we bridge this gap of peace on the planet. So, Carol, can you talk for a minute about the book? Because I have it in front of me, In Search of Peace, and it's a wonderful manuscript. It's for the children, dedicated to the children, and talks about what we can leave for them in terms of a peaceful planet.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm thrilled to have had Susan Babcock and her husband work on that book and recognize that, there are maybe 500 million orphans right now on this planet. I mean, what have we done? And what are we going to do? And the book is focused a lot on ego. It's interesting because it intertwines their personal journey stories, which is really interesting, with mine. I didn't know that they were going to include my story. I've been talking with them for a few years, and they were recording what I was saying. And so parts of things that I haven't thought about now for decades, because I tend to forget about what I did 5 minutes ago because I'm really on a fast move, as many of us are who are activists on different issues. And they focused on intertwining stories that are real, not fiction, that as I look at this, it could have been a fiction. It could have been a movie of many of our lives because it represents what so many of us have gone through who want change in many different very important, urgent issues of concern. And the book does it in the light. Suzanne has the group that the Bridges for Peace that's addresses in that book, and they have identified people in over 150 countries who are praying for peace, who are working for peace, and they're just doing this on their own. It's kind of shows you, John Denver wrote a song called It's About Time a long time ago. And in it, he sings about what one man can do, what one human can do. I think these people are one of the examples of what any one of us can do if we put our action plan, just sit down in our quiet and hear what it is that we can do or maybe came to the earth to do that we've forgotten, because we all can do something, and then do it. Don't think that it can't be done. Just go for it. And for me, I look at myself in the third person. If I got into my ego, I think I'd freeze, of the things that I've gotten involved in, because I just keep going with what do I think needs to be done today? Who can I write to? Where can I go and show up at what meeting and say what's in my heart? And I've ended up being able to, with very little credential compared to some of the other people with PhDs. I'm using an honorary doctorate that I got for work I did in Africa. And so I can use my doctorate. I can go to places with no credentials at all and say, what are you putting above our heads? And by the way, here's an alternative. One of the keys that I have figured out is that when we go to different meetings or we write our letters, rather than just protest, and I helped to start a movement with about, I understand, 50 million people were involved originally to stop Star Wars in the early 80s when it was announced by Reagan that they were going to plan this strategic defense initiative. I called it Star Wars at the advice of a journalist from CNN, Kevin Sanders. I called it Star Wars because he said people could say or remember strategic defense initiative, but it was space-based weapons that they are about to imminently put into space. And to take that long journey along the way, which in the book is described so beautifully. Suzanne picked different pieces of my story, again, intertwined with theirs. But it's things that I didn't even remember. I wouldn't remember now that I did, but that show what any of us can do. And to me, it's inspiring to hear other people's stories, and then for us to be able to work together and support each other in our different issues. So I go to meetings about everything from the animals to chemtrails to, climate change, to ways of living sustainably. I've gotten into studying these tiny houses now. It's amazing.
So, Carol, your mission is really about stopping the weaponization of space, and you've known this for 4 decades now. In your heart, you know that is your mission. And this treaty on the prevention of the placement of weapons in outer space, have we expired our opportunity to stop that from happening and to get this treaty on board?
Good question. Yes, almost, but not totally. We have a very small opportunity of time. And again, yes, thank you. That's the mission that I came in with and worked with Wehner Von Braun, the father of rocketry, who, had worked under Hitler and helped plan the escape to get out. There's a one-man story with all of his German scientists that were called all kinds of names, but really they just wanted to go into space. They wanted to go peacefully. They know that there's no alien coming to attack us. And that's where I came from, the knowledge that when I met him in an aerospace company and he gave me this continued assignment that I've never stopped and want to get it done. And I see that right now, we have a very small opportunity. Just 2 days ago, it was announced that there's going to be a whole office set up to focus on, quote, Star Wars. And that means, and from what they say, maybe in the next day or 6 months or whatever it is, we don't know exactly. They won't give us the right timing for sure. So that's part of the distraction campaign that's quite intentional to keep people either dumbed down or working on something else. They are getting ready imminently to put weapons in space, but they have not, in spite of rumors, based weapons above our heads. They are talking now about putting platforms up with lasers, about mining the asteroids, which they're going to do. And it's a matter of whether we get this treaty signed or not that will ban all space-based weapons without trying to name them, because once you do that, I've learned the debates start, and that's part of the stall. We can now call for a ban on all space-based weapons so that they don't base them permanently on platforms above our heads or on celestial bodies, the asteroid, the moon, Mars. And if they're going to, which they are, put technology up there, then we, our generation, yours and mine and whoever's listening, we have a responsibility, if we connect to this issue, to get this treaty signed. The treaty was first introduced by the leaders of China and Russia, who, of course, are now being named the enemy. And so we go from one war to the next to have enemies. If you go to YouTube and look up Carol Rosin Disclosure Project, you'll hear that formula, so I won't repeat it, for how they keep us going into each war, leading to the identity of ETs as being hostile, which they are not. And it leads to also the fact that China and Russia are not the enemy. They have been calling for, let's start with peace for the children, but also peace in space for decades, for generations. I've been tracking this for over 40 years, day and night, and they have never deviated from that. They will, however, China, Russia, and the rest of the world too, retaliate if they are pushed and have to. Putin has been saying that out loud. The head of China has also been saying, let's get this treaty signed. They called a couple of years ago for an update. Any ideas for updating the treaty? And I put together a little group of people. that when we updated it, it's on the website peaceinspace.com. You go and read that treaty. It's guided by the cosmos reality. It is updated from the Russia-China treaty proposed. The last time they updated theirs was in 2008, but they keep calling for it to get signed. And if everybody would write to the presidents of China and Russia, you can find their addresses right on the internet. I get the daily report actually of what Putin does every day. It's amazing. You can get all that and sign up for it. It's free. And write to them and say, please now reintroduce, call on the world leaders. The way the treaty's written now, it only needs 9 world leaders to sign it, to turn it into a binding world law. And don't listen to the activists who are saying, oh, all we can get is a code of conduct for space activities. That's childish. It's rhetoric. It's a stall. It sounds good, like they can get something. It means nothing. It's not. A code of conduct is not a binding world law. A treaty is. In the human species, that's what we actually respect. And the next questions, of course, will be, but what about if the United States or somebody wants to put weapons in space? How can you stop and enforce the treaty? It's a new way. In space, it's different from Earth. It says all this in the treaty. If you will read it, it's Paul Hellyer, the former Minister of Defense of Canada, says it's the most important document of our time. Read that little treaty. And what it does is it describes what can be in space, what can't be in space, very simply. The last part of it's in legalese terms. If you're not a lawyer, you may not be interested in that part. But it describes the whole cosmos reality. And so it also says if we call on these world leaders, only 9 need to sign it, the way it's written, to produce a binding world law that is verifiable and enforceable. And so how is it verified? Technology now, it's in space and it's used worldwide so that we know every nut and bolt that's in space. And we have enforcement based on the international cooperation, which is all there is in space. It's all peaceful, in spite of rumors that there's fighting in space or whatever. It is not happening. And so it gets spread around by good researchers who quote each other, or they quote some old researcher and everybody thinks that person is the god of the issue. But when you look at the technology and what is possible, what is happening, and you talk to solidly based people who have gone into space as astronauts or cosmonauts, you know that there's only international cooperation on the space station right now, which is our joint project in space at this time for the human species. And they laugh at the thought of fighting each other. 16 countries around the world that should be adversaries or are on Earth are having a great time in outer space together on the space station. And now more and more projects and more countries are working on international cooperative ventures, which is what I'm starting to write about now. And soon we'll be able to educate everybody. I'll make this available because the projects that are going on jointly in outer space support this space treaty. That's all there is in space, and all our generation has to do is get these world leaders to sign the treaty. So I'm preparing packages right now for the president of Chile, an updated package of talking points that I'm getting from, because I want to present what it is they can do that's an alternative to weapons in space. Earlier I was saying this, and I want to continue this one thought because it's so important. When we present the treaty or anything that we're working on for change, we must present the new vision in the same breath. Notice that even in my breath, I wait until the end. I should start at the beginning and say, here are all the things that are going on cooperative in space. This, because most people don't know. They're hearing and watching the news, which is mostly bad news. Or if they're watching mainstream news, they're just getting the latest gossip or, urgent shooting of our time, which is horrible. But the new channels, the alternative channels I mentioned, are great in around the world of what's really happening. What isn't happening is a vision of what's going on in outer space that's positive. And the reason that is the most important thing that at least I can do right now is to show what's going on that's beneficial, that provides enormous applications of space age technology, innovations, just the urgent problem, man-made or natural disasters on this planet, that help solve the urgent problems of human needs, of new energy, of our environmental crisis that we're in the middle of right now. That's, if you read the Stanford report that came out recently, we are in the process of human extinction. It's not coming. We're in. So we have this little chance, and to me, the treaty, as Paul Hellyer says, is the most important document of our time, because in space, in the cosmos, is where everything will switch. The consciousness shifts as soon as you look up, and you see the stars, and you see the planets, and if you remember who you are, maybe you remember creating universes and living other places. Who knows? People are coming up now that children are coming up with stories that are amazing that they remember. It's a new time, and it's based on not the earthbound viewpoints, but on the viewpoint of Earth and space from the space positions, which is where you find the new method of enforcement of this treaty that's based on cooperation, not confrontation, and it exists. We just have to maintain it, and the treaty does that. And also verification. We can observe the Earth. Of course, it's being used to spy and all the great things that, thank goodness, Snowden and other whistleblowers have brought out. But it can also be used for the good. And to me, to start presenting that positive vision, anything that comes through each of us, in the act with a dedication and intention to this, of replacing the whole weapons of war industry before it goes into space. That is the key to this treaty. And that's the vision that I think has been missing from the conversation. It is literally a space vision. It includes the ETs, none of whom are hostile. They evolve, not experiment more, because they have finally figured out what they were looking for, why some of us are sitting in the light and some of us are fighting and eating each other. They have realized that we are all egos. The ego has taken over the spirit, the awareness of our souls. And we can now, in the light context, in the context of recognizing who we are as being light, and we have to be in the transition conversation to the people who are building the weapon systems that are now escalating and evolving in our generation, not just around the world, which we saturated and destroyed. We now are escalating them into that place to have them be based above our heads. That treaty will stop that from happening, and verifiably and enforceably, but with a new definition of those two words, because it's not based on earthbound thinking. It's based on what is happening in space.
So, Carol,
T's are not hostile, and the treaty recognizes all that.
So one question, did the weaponization programs involve nuclear weapons and other weapons that could easily destroy the planet? Is that true?
Good question. All of the above. All of the above. Whatever the mind can think, and whatever you can see on Sci-Fi Channel, if you watch Ancient Aliens, which is a lot of this stuff, the mind can create those realities. And if you can imagine nuclear weapons, of course they're talking now not so much about that. That's why the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 is obsolete. It only would have stopped weapons of mass destruction. Now the weapons that they're creating reach up into every kind of weapon you can imagine, to psychotronic mind control weapons, that 3 of which, placed in geosynchronous orbit 22,300 miles above the Earth, hit the footprint. 3 of them in geosynchronous orbit hit the footprint of the whole Earth. And that means with these weapons, they don't need weapons of mass destruction. They can control the mind, how you think, how you act, whether you're sick, whether you're well, as an individual or as a group. We need to stop these weapons. These are way far advanced. They call them non-lethal weapons, non-local weapons. They have all kinds of names for them. Kinetic energy kill, directed energy weapons, and all kinds of polluting and blah, blah, blah weapons. But if we continue to focus on the weapons without presenting
the vision for what they can be. For example, nuclear, great issue, very complicated issue. On Earth, do you know that all of Latin America and the Caribbean already years ago signed a treaty to ban nuclear weapons boundaries? Most people in the United States, even around the world, but especially here, have no idea that the Treaty of Tlatelolco even exists. Of course, if weapons are put above their heads, that treaty that bans nuclear for Latin America and the Caribbean countries will become null and void, because anything and everything, the goal of Vision 2020 that came out, that I have a copy of if anybody wants it, on my computer, because it may be taken down from the net by now. It says domination and control of everything and everyone on Earth and in space, from space, making space inaccessible to other countries. Of course, this comes out of the United States, and now allies are who get seduced into working on these systems, into going into wars that you see every day by offers of financial assistance, extended business and trade, technology transfer, a seat in NATO or one of the other groups, groupies, clubs. So many other countries are now involved in these U.S.-initiated program, by the way, to dominate and control space and Earth, everyone and everything on Earth and in space from space. You know, in war, it's always about seizing the high ground. And the high ground in yours and my generation is space above our heads. That is where we can stop the war game if we come up with a vision and if we all write to the leaders of the heads of states of the world and also corporations, because as we know, it's not the heads of states who actually run the world. We're talking corporates, bankers, all that. But again, the conspiracies are out there. The uncovering of cover-ups have taken place. Disclosure on the whole ET program taken place. We're not alone. What we don't know is that in space is where everything shifts, and the treaty itself, it's a story. It looks like fiction in a way. It's so beautiful. It's worth the time for everybody to go to that peaceandspace.com. I'm sorry that website's so out of date, but the treaty is not. Go and read that. It is the story of how we get out of this mess, and it will stop the nuclear industry. How? Because when we get into this cosmos scientific reality, there is such a thing as zero-point energy, free energy. And of course, that's one of the big pieces of information that's being stopped. So the distraction among the anti-activists, the activists against nukes, is always focused on the nukes. But it is not yet, this is just part of the evolutionary process, focused on what free energy is about. What is zero-point energy? Edgar Mitchell is getting ready to come out and really focus on developing free energy, zero-point energy. I'm co-authoring a book with him right now. We'll include some of the